name is Clifford Kipp. I'm the Executive Director for the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third and final Wilderness Speaker Series hosted by ourselves in partnership with Northwest Montana Firefighter Lookout Association, the Wild Montana Flathead Community Chapter, and Flathead Valley Community College Natural Resources Department. We're happy to have you here. Thanks for making the trip. We will be talking about our Artists and Wilderness Connections program tonight, and we've got some artists here to speak to you about their experience in residence in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, working their craft. Want to make sure and recognize Swan Valley Connections, the Forest Service. We've got some representatives in the audience, and the Hockaday Museum, our partners in that Artists and Wilderness Connections program, one of about 4 or 5 programs that Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation helps run through our nonprofit in partnership with the Forest Service. We do want to make sure that this program does not happen. Make sure to recognize the packers, the horse packers that get the folks back into the backcountry with their gear and their supplies and get them safely out. In fact, Frank Vitale here in the audience, one of our board members. I'm not sure if there's any other packers here, but I want to make sure and point out those folks and their significant effort. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa here. Thank you for coming.
Hello, everybody. Oh, wow. My name's Alyssa Cordova. I'm the Executive Director of the Hockaday Museum of Art. For those of you not familiar with the Hockaday Museum of Art, we are a wonderful art museum in downtown Kalispell, and we've been there for 55 years, if you can believe it, in a historic 1903 Carnegie Library building that maybe some of you remember used to be the public library. So we're very fortunate to call the library home, and we do a lot of programs throughout the year, and one of our most special programs is the Artist Wilderness Connection that we do in partnership with the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation, Flathead National Forest, and Swan Valley Connections. And so we're very grateful to be doing that program. So for those of you not familiar with Artist Wilderness Connection, it has been going for 20 years. So started in 2004. We're excited to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the program, and that's part of why we chose to collaborate on this speaker series with the Bob Marshall Wilderness. So very excited to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And so we've had over 50 artists participate since then, and we have 4 of these incredible artists with us this evening. We have Francesca Droll, we have Ginny Ogle, Reggie Carter, and Rob Akey, and they have thankfully agreed to participate and be willing to subject themselves to our questions, and hopefully it will be a fun experience for them. I know I've been really excited for this moment. I've heard throughout the years of my tenure as director little snippets of their experiences and stories from them and other artists as well, but I'm really excited to dive in a little deeper into their experiences. So I thought we'd start us off with just some brief introductions, if we could kind of go down the line this way, and just what year you did the residency, what cabin you stayed in, a little bit about your background and your art practice, and then we'll go into some questions that Cliff and I will take turns moderating.
Hello, I'm Francesca Droll, and I am a pastel painter living in Bigfork. I was in the AWC program in 2017 with Ginny. We went in as partners, and we stayed in Granite Cabin, which is on the middle fork of the Flathead River. I spent 35 years as a graphic designer running my own business with my husband, John Webster, and I retired a couple of years ago, so I'm happily now spending a lot more time pursuing my art journey. In 2002, I took my first painting workshop with John Boone here in the Valley, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I also learned at that time that I wanted to be a little more intentional with my art making. And what I mean by that is I wanted to be more consistent and more focused on making art and what I was doing, really pursuing it. as opposed to just sort of treating it like a hobby. So that was a very valuable turning point for me. And then the next year I took another workshop from the same artist, John Poon. And in that workshop, I met a great group of women. And after the workshop was over, we all decided to get together and start plein-airing one day a week. And we were very committed and very dedicated, and we did that for years. We would even paint, you know, in the dead of winter, especially in the early years. And then finally, of course, COVID sort of put an end to that and sort of just killed the momentum that we had built up over almost 7 years of painting together. So the painting workshops were a very valuable experience. My subject matter is mostly landscapes, as you would assume, but I also like to do animals and I like to do still lifes. I absolutely still love to paint in the wilderness whenever I get the chance, and I do quite a lot of that still. I'm represented by the Four Fine Art Gallery in Whitefish and Bigfork, and I will be having my first solo show this coming June as their featured artist in Whitefish. And I left some postcards out on the table. Feel free to pick some up, and I hope to see you there. Thank you for coming tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jenny Ogle, and I live in Kalispell. I just want to thank Alyssa, the Hockaday, and the Bob Marshall, and the different entities for providing this program, because it was just a highlight of my life, really, and especially my painting life. So as Francesca said, we shared an experience at the Granite Cabin on the middle fork of the Flathead River in the Bob Marshall Wilderness for 11 days. We had a wonderful packer that took us in named Matt Farwell. I don't know if Matt's here tonight, but he was just awesome. Took us in, and to wave goodbye to him was like, oh, well, this is getting real now, you know. So, but every minute was wonderful. I would do it again if I had the chance, and I may try. But anyway, the connection of the wilderness and the art was fabulous, because they're both passions of mine. I have just studied all my life in the different fields of art. I have sort of an evolutionary career in art. Calligraphy was a big part of my life. And then I took a class here at the college from Rachel Warner, an oil painting class, and I just have continued my study in oil painting since. Mostly landscapes, a lot of plein air. I was in the group that Francesca told you about that painted every week in the dead of winter for a whole year, every week. And then it sort of got so it wasn't quite as frequent, but just a wonderful experience. So I also show at Four Fine Art in Whitefish and Bigfork. So I have worked there, and we participate in Hockaday events here and there when they present. So thank you for coming, and we'll share whatever else you'd like to hear about.
Hello. Hello. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Richie Carter, and I am from Kalispell, but I'm more particularly from Marion. Yes, represent. Okay. So I'm an oil painter as well, and I did the Artist Wilderness Connection in 2016, so the year before these two, and I was also at Granite Cabin on the Middle Fork. It's pretty. It felt pretty cush for being in the backcountry. It was like, you know, we had an outhouse right next to us, which is, I don't know where my painting is, but I painted the outhouse right over there. It's a very important part of the backcountry. If anybody has spent time in the backcountry, it feels like you're in a suite to get to have an actual outhouse, because a lot of the places in the Bob Marshall, you don't have anything. Anyways, yeah, I'm still painting, I do a lot of landscape work, a lot of plein air work, always doing the Hockaday glacier paint out as well. And then I travel a lot all over the world and just paint wherever I go. So this experience with the Artist Wilderness Connection, it was kind of early on in my art journey. And I was telling Teresa as I came in, I was like, this is one of those years. It's 2016. It's one of the only years in the last like 10 that I actually remember of like, I can mark this. It was the year I did Artist Wilderness Connection. Mm-hmm. So it was very significant, and we'll share more stories. There's some great do you guys know what type 2 fun is? Because type 1 fun is like, you went out to dinner, it was great. No one really cares to hear about it. Right? Type 2 fun is when something kind of bad happens, and in the moment you're like, I wish I was somewhere else. But afterwards you tell a story and you're like, okay, that's a good story. So we got some of those. Thanks for coming tonight, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Rob Akey. I'm from Whitefish. And I'm from Whitefish. And I'm kind of the grandfather, maybe more than one way up here. My residency was 2009, which was actually fairly early in my full-time painting career, because I kind of came to it late as well. I came out of the graphic design realm as well. I was creative director at Tonka Toys in Minnesota. I went to school in Minnesota for art, and but I moved my family back in '93 because everybody from Montana comes back to Montana. At least the smart ones do. But Pendant Cabin. I was in Pendant Cabin. I think that's about, somebody can probably correct me. I think it was about 6 miles in from Holland Lake. Had never been on that side of the Bob. Didn't know anything about Pendant Cabin. Andy Breland and Chuck Allen were my packers, and those guys were great. I talked to Andy a few times before going in, and I was just getting excited, and I was kind of wondering, what kind of cabin. I worked trail crew for a year in Glacier, and back in the '70s, and we were in snowshoe cabins. And if any of you guys are familiar with those are iconic, giant, large log, beautiful, out of the Swiss Alps type cabin. And so that's what they're like, right, Andy? He says, Rob, it's more like a tool shed. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, because as Richie said, anything is great up. And I went alone, and I went for a week. Not much of an alone backcountry guy ever. I'd highly recommend it now, 15 years later. The first night, how dark is it?
Oh,
Yeah.
It's that dark. And, we're all adults and
scary
still. But it was all good. And many thanks to everybody involved, all of the entities, Hockaday Coalition and Bob folks, and the Packers especially. And really want to mention Andy, who is no longer with us. Those guys were great. They gave me a ride in.
What?
Unfair.
I'm not supposed to tell her. So don't you tell her. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Andy, and may he rest in peace. So that leads a nice segue to our question here about the Packers. Tell us a little bit about the Packers, what it was like to get the necessary supplies in. You see these pictures sometimes with, timbers for a bridge or, a propane tank or something. What's it like to get the art supplies in the back, and what was it like working with the Packers?
Well, you want us to
I
start?
have a story about the Packers. We had quite an experience. We had gotten advice from Richie and Kenny, and they said, bring everything you want, because they had 14 horses. They didn't even take them all in, and just bring whatever you want. So we listened to them, and we got there and Matt had 4 horses, and
He was riding one.
Pardon me?
And he was riding
And he was
one.
riding
One. So, yeah.
So he goes, "Oh, you guys, there's no way I can get all this stuff in." So then we had to go through the car and throw stuff back in the car, and we eventually got whittled down so that he could get us in. But he goes, "You're going to have trouble getting out of here because the people coming in only have 3 horses." And so we had to check in to the Forest Service every morning just to make sure we were still alive and everything. And so we said, "Could you get us some more horses? Because we're not going to get all our stuff out." And they said, "Well, everybody's really busy. I don't know if we can do that." So the night before we were going to leave, we burned all the extra food, and I even burned some clothing. And we compacted everything we could compact. And the horse people showed up and they went, "No way. We are not getting you out of here." One of the people was sick, and so we were short a horse anyway. So there were only 2 horses. So anyway, we had to leave at least half our stuff in there, and another pack trip had to bring us out. So, just be careful who you listen to before you go. I advise anybody to go on the trip, but just make sure you get the right advice.
Okay, well, that's perfect because we had 14 horses. And we were talking to Andy, and he was our packer, and yeah, he was like, "Bring whatever you want." So we had 3 coolers, one that was designated just for dry ice, and we brought a lot of ribeye steaks and hamburger. Like, we brought so much food, and yeah, we packed it all in with 14 horses. So I thought everybody got that.
Yeah.
Sorry. But yeah, I feel like Andy, when he's like bringing, so I went with Ken Yaris. I don't know if you know Ken Yaris. He's an incredible landscape painter. I share a studio with him. So we both went in together because it is scary being in the backcountry just by yourself. Like, I've only done it like once actually, and it was a little unsettling to say the least. But yeah, I think Andy, when they're bringing us in, we're just 2 like kids. I feel like it's like, oh, these guys are gonna have so much fun. But yeah, he did not let us ride a horse, even though there's 14. But he did carry our packs, and like we brought anything we wanted, all sorts of art supplies, and they just put it on the horses, and it takes a long time because you have to make sure it's balanced on either side, and you let them do all of that, and yeah, they just magically, you get there and it's already there for you, which was the best. I do a lot of backpacking, so usually I'm carrying everything, and I try not to bring paints because it's like every ounce counts. So to have the horses was certainly an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andy, I had Andy, and there's a pattern, but it was just me. And they had, when I met them at Holland Lake, they had just come out after bringing in a whole bunch of fish somewhere. And they had, I don't know how many, but a bunch. As a matter of fact, sorry, Andy said, "Is this all you got?" I think I had a 12-pack of beer. And he's like, "Really?" Well, I was only going to be a week, so it's like, which I could probably drink more. But it was like, yeah, seriously, we have like all, and they don't like to leave them behind. So, I mean, we trailed everybody in. They don't like to leave them,
Yeah, they can't.
How many
can't.
horses?
I don't know if there was 14, but there was 10 anyway. And Sydney, Andy's daughter, was with us. And I'll remember this, she was riding Chester Cheeto. Funny how some things stick with you. The name of her horse was Chester Cheeto. And he was kind of orange. But yeah, they were great. And the whole balancing, that you bring that up and it brings things back. So one thing I've never noticed at packing entry and egress and wherever they land, like at a cabin somewhere, there's always big piles of rocks. And I learned that they balance with rocks. So they always like to have a few extra, those poor mules.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, you're out of bounds. I'm gonna put some rocks on you. But they do. And it's like, wow, learned something right there. But packing, those guys were great. They were really good. And just another note, riding in wasn't the only fortunate thing. I don't know what his name was, but a young fella came through with the Forest Service with 3 horses, and he was on his way to Big Prairie over Holbrook Pass, I believe. And Granite Cabin is in a hole. It's kind of down in a basin. So if you want some viewpoint, and if you're not climbing up to Pendant Pass every day to try to get your radio to work, which is another story a little later, then you want to get out of the hole to get some view. And sure enough, he's like, I'm going up to Holbrook Pass. You want to ride?
Oh, nice.
So I got to ride up there too.
I'd like to go with Rob next.
I must have looked like really needy. You can't carry anything.
I hope this panel doesn't end in a fight or something. Well, my question for you all is just in terms of your art making and your thoughts of what you were going to make, the materials, and you can each speak to this, whoever would like. Did you go in with a plan of what you wanted to do and create, or was it a combination, or did you just go with materials? Yeah, and if you can share a little insights into your thoughts and process of planning your art making.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, especially concerning plein air. I've always approached plein air as just a sort of a learning experience and a place to go to observe what I'm seeing in front of me. And the paintings that I do out there are actually more studies of color notes and trying just to get the essence of what's striking me about the scene. So I knew going out that I wasn't going to be doing any finished paintings. That I knew. I didn't know what to expect about the area because I really hadn't seen any photos. And so it was sort of just go out and let it all sort of happen. We painted a lot. I think, our whole focus was just to be painting every single moment we could. And that in its essence was a great thing, but it was also very exhausting because we didn't look at this as a vacation. We were there to accomplish certain things. And essentially what I got out of it was I was so mesmerized by the water because essentially we were in a canyon, and there was some mountains and there was a canyon wall right there. And to see anything, you had to either look up or look down. So essentially the water was what was right in front of us. And that was great because it really intrigued me. And I was studying how the reflections were working and the transparency and how it moved over the rocks. So that was a lot of fun for me.
Anybody else?
I luckily had been to this area, so I kind of knew roughly what I was getting into. I knew there were some hikes up to like Castle Lake and stuff where you could get some of these views that Rob's talking about. But the Bob Marshall, especially in this more northern part, there's a lot of pine trees. So you like get in there and you're like, okay, there's just pine trees everywhere. Like, how I'm gonna have to climb really high to get some vantage point. So we painted, and Ken, who I was with, he didn't know this, and he was a little sour, to say it nicely at first, about all the pine trees. But you got really, like, we just painted in the forest and just painted what was around. But same with us, it was just to be out there and try to paint on site. When we say plein air, it's like the French impressionist term for painting outdoors on site, if you're not familiar with that. So yeah, it was just to go paint as much as we could and have fun and go fishing, and it felt kind of like a vacation. It was that's kind of how life is always for me at this point. Like, when I go on vacation, it's work at the same time. So this was kind of the start of that. It's like, I get to do this for my career, I think. And not just getting the work done there, but afterwards we did a show at the Hockaday Museum, and Ken and I both got a show in the upstairs part, the really beautiful gallery space. And then we stayed, I think it was like a month we were in there painting every day, as our studio. And so we had kids come in from the schools and do field trips there. So that was just like a really cool experience, not only to go back there and trying to get work done, but then to come out and get to, we had a year to put together this like professional museum show. And for us, that was just like such a opportunity and treat that really, yeah, like pushed us into like, all right, you guys are artists, like working artists, go do that. So yeah.
Yeah, so Richie mentioned fishing, and plein air painting is I've heard it referred to or compared to by artists a lot, is like a lot like fishing, and especially back then. And I think we all kind of had this experience early in our painting careers. So we're all kind of figuring out the materials, and usually plein air painting. Well, back then, you get packed in and you go set up somewhere, and within the first hour, you pretty much have a full list of all the things you forgot, or the colors, the pigments you wish you would have brought. And boy, so that comparison to fishing is very much, you go fishing and you never have the right fly, you never have the right bait, you never. But with as for intent, again, like fishing, I've always looked at plein air painting as just kind of you go see what you're going to get, and sometimes you get, and sometimes you don't, which is nice to have more than a couple of days, so that if you fail on the first day, there's always the next day to look forward to, or if you fail for the first 5, and you're thinking you still got 2. But there's not a lot of intent on my part, other than see what that country has to offer, and that's really kind of the fun part, because you have to adapt. You got to find it on the fly and make the most of it. It sounds like pretty common knowledge right now, but back then we were all I won't speak for you. I was still finding that stuff out, so it was a little bit stressful. I mean, I remember the experience, while a blast, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But there were different types of stresses, like the dead horse up the trail.
Oh.
Francesca talked a little bit about being tired, that we worked really hard, and we would get up at between 6 and 6:30 so we could catch the light coming over the mountain, and then we really didn't get to bed till after 10 at night. And so you're sort of doing the camping, cooking, that sort of effort, as well as your paintings. So it is a full day, and we loved every minute of it. It was fabulous. But the nighttime, we would get into the cabin because it was getting dark, and we both did journals of our stay there. So we can share those with you later if you'd like. And I kind of combined my old calligraphy days with my journal there, and because of the many pine trees, I kind of took an interest in the wildflowers that were up there. And then we kept a list of all the animals that we saw while we were in there too. We saw fox and bear. We had a bear visit us one night. And Francesca has a good story about the bear. So anyway, it was just, every minute was exciting and fun and a learning. Like Rob said, we were pretty new in our painting careers too. So to be immersed, not only in the wilderness, but in our art. You just ate, slept, and breathed your painting, and it's a wonderful learning experience.
So on that particular note, I'm curious to know, wilderness is a particular type of designation for the landscape. Is the experience that you had, could that have happened anywhere in the woods, or was there something special about being in a designated wilderness area? And maybe you could speak to, you've mentioned sort of the dark skies and a little bit of the solitude. Like I I can picture the pack train, riding away, and you're like, okay, I guess we're here. Yeah, can you speak to like that, what it means to be in that kind of place, if you can.
Yeah, well, certainly that. I mean, it is, and for being alone, I guess it was a little magnified, but the solitude, it definitely is impactful. The bigness, I mean, especially hiking up to a pass to use your radio or to whatever. I mean, standing on Lena Peak, which was above Holbrook Pass, and painting from the top of a peak. And there's actually the remnants. Some of you lookout people probably know this. I don't know what the name of Lena Peak Lookout, it must have been, but it's no longer. But the wreckage of it is there, and standing up there, and just how huge. I mean, ridge after ridge after ridge after ridge. And it's like, okay, over there is Big Prairie. And you realize how far and how big that space is. There's nothing quite like the size of the Bob once you can get up and see the whole thing. Also, I had a lot of rain. Almost every day rained at some point. A couple of days rained all day, just a steady pounder. Which is why there's a photo of me in the cabin, which, I must have had. It was dark.
Yeah.
Little windows in that cabin, but I painted inside. But there was some traffic up there, some hiker traffic, quite a bit actually. And Pendant Cabin being out in a meadow and sort of on the thoroughfare heading out Holland Lake, there were a lot of cold, wet backpackers went by there. And if they saw a little smoke curling out of that stovepipe, anybody in there? Which was very cool. And, so the solitary thing was, that was at night. But during the day, I was a little bit of a coffee shop. My favorite memory of this is towards the end, and a couple came through, a younger couple, and I actually saw them through the window because for some reason I heard them. They were talking loud, and I looked, and it was funny because, I didn't go out and like hail them down or anything, but I watched them, and they just looked at the cabin and they talked, and they looked at the cabin and talked. Pretty soon they came in. Eventually they came in. It's like, come on in, I got coffee. And they sat down and they were soaked. And we were sitting there and just got quiet. And the fellow just looked at his girlfriend or wife and he said, pinch me.
Oh.
And she said, what? He goes, I cannot believe that I'm sitting in a warm cabin, having a warm cup of coffee, that I've been dreaming about this for a couple of days. So it was funny. It was very cool. And that happened a lot, so which was great.
We were surprised at the traffic in there too. And instead of rain, we had wind that we had to deal with quite a bit. So we had a place, a little meadow surrounded by trees that we called our quiet space. And we'd go there when the wind was blowing really hard. And we were there one afternoon and we heard some voices. And so we looked up the trail and here came about 12-year-old Boy Scouts that were wanting to camp in our quiet place. And they carried these blow-up kayaks and all this stuff, and they were gonna camp out and then float the river. So we were told nobody's supposed to stay there. So we had to, unfortunately, send them on down the trail, but 2 days later they floated by us and waved. So there were more people in there than we expected too. Did you have that too?
Good Boy Scouts.
You had Boy Scouts too? Oh, funny. Yeah.
Go ahead, Richie.
So the being in the wilderness like that, has everybody been in the Bob to some extent, like done a trip of a few people? So it is incredibly expansive, and when like you're in the cabin, that's like the only man-made thing in like 2 million acres or something like that. 1.7. Sorry. It's really humbling. And then, but yeah, there is a lot of traffic that comes in, but at night you are very much alone. And one of the things for me is, I remember for the first like 2 days, I was like just finding my phone just by like I just was so used to it, and I didn't even have a phone with me, but I would just be reaching for it and like wanting to check something. And it took a couple days to get like kind of used to the solitude. And then when you're in the solitude, there's something really beautiful about it, but you're also just up against your own self. There's very few distractions out there. And when kind of back to what Rob was saying earlier, when you're painting, like everybody who you tell is you're an artist, they're like, oh my gosh, that must be so fun. Like to be with this self-critic all the time saying like this isn't good enough, because paint, it's really hard to paint realistically because I mean it's very technical, and one day you go out and you might get a really great painting and you're like, I know how to paint, I know how to paint. The next day it's like you don't know anything. And even to this day, like I'll still go out and just get skunked really bad. And it's so when you're out there in the solitude and you're just with your own art and it's not going well, like for me, I don't think I had a good painting till the second to last day. And it was like incredibly infuriating and like frustrating and stressful because you're like, I'm back here like as an artist and I don't even feel like an artist. But there's just nothing to hide behind. There's no distractions out there. So there's that side to it as well, which I think is really incredible because that requires you to kind of face yourself in different ways and grow. It's just uncomfortable. But then I remember leaving. I actually got a float out, so I had Glacier Raft Company pack in inflatable kayaks. Ken walked out with the horses, and I had two friends that joined me, and I floated out. So that was amazing. But it poured rain in August the whole way down the river. It was like what? But when I got out, I just did not want to turn my phone back on. I wanted to be back there so bad. Just that no distraction thing. You get into a rhythm, and you just don't have many places like that, unfortunately, anymore that you can do that. Even in Glacier, it's just like there's so much going on. But when you go into the Bob, yeah, there's gonna be people on the trail, but it's still with all the regulations of you can't have no motors, obviously, but even wheels. Is that correct?
Yeah, no mechanized.
Yeah, no mechanized things, tools, equipment. And it's really incredible to preserve that because I think all of that goes into the experience that one can have when they're like really just out there without the distraction of many modern amenities.
Thanks.
I should mention too that all of the artists with us happen to be visual artists, and they also happen to be all painters, and all of them have plein air painting as part of their practice. So we kind of lucked out on that. But the residency program does include other art forms as well: music, writing, photography, all different kinds of art and mediums. So just by coincidence, happens all of these artists' work is somewhat connected. But so I had a question, and Richie, that was a great segue into it, was just thinking about an artist's role in connection to nature and how, I think a lot about this too, especially in this area, how artists can fill a dual role sometimes of being an artist slash conservationist, artist slash naturalist, artist slash environmentalist, artist slash documentarian. So do any of you feel that factors into your practice, being kind of whether intentional or unintentional, filling this dual role as both an artist and that connection to nature?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, as a plein air artist, nature is part of who you are because you can so easily, much easier, paint in the studio and usually get better results. So to go out into nature, sort of fulfills something in your soul, I would say. I mean, I've always been an outdoor person. For most of my adult life, I was hiking and backpacking. And so I always had a healthy respect for the wilderness and for the animals there. And then when I started painting and found out that I could combine the two, that was like, wow, this is awesome. I can go out and do my two favorite things, be in nature and paint. So in some ways, I think the two go hand in hand because if you're a landscape painter at all, you need to be out there observing the landscape. So as a conservationist or as a person who appreciates nature and feels very strongly that it needs to be protected and that we need to respect it and allow it what it needs to thrive. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They just go hand in hand in my book anyway.
I think of as documenting, you mentioned documenting, we are painting here and now of what this wilderness is right now. And I think of the John Ferry who painted before the park was even a park, but he painted in the park. And we look at his paintings and see what it was like in that day and age. And we see the different styles and materials that they used then. And then the Hockaday did a wonderful show called Timeless Legacy and emphasized the women painters in Glacier National Park from the turn of the century till about the 1950s or so. And just a fabulous look into the past of how they transported their materials in and the weather conditions they painted in and their results, and they're documenting that period of life in the park. So yeah, I think we don't see it now because we've just been there, but I think in the long run, the artists of those time periods really do document, and it's a learning experience for all of us.
I'll try this one. No, I won't. Hello? Hello. You hear me?
There you go.
Guess I should have stuck with the other one. Yeah, for me, growing up in Montana, the landscape, and a lot of us are long time, if not lifelong residents, the landscape just becomes part of who we are, and which probably is one of the big reasons we do what we do. And I don't think any landscape painter can paint the landscape without having at least possibly a subconscious respect and for the land, in terms of being, a conservationist, literally, or at least a good steward. That goes with the respect that you have for the landscape. And the Bob Marshall Wilderness is just kind of the sort of the enormous poster child for all of those ideas. And so to be able to paint it is pretty amazing and a great privilege.
So I grew up going into the Bob Marshall with my uncle. He'd pack us in, and that I learned a lot about being in the wilderness and things like what you can and can't do. Like you can't throw your trash out, but those are obvious things, obviously. But just doing this program too, you have to kind of relearn all the things of like, okay, this is how you are in the backcountry. You pack everything out that you brought in. How to go to the bathroom, things like that, which are really important to know if you are going to spend time in the backcountry. So doing the Artist Wilderness Connection is kind of like a refresher of like, how do you actually be a steward to these incredible wildernesses that we have literally in our backyard? So I just feel incredibly grateful to have it so close and to have gotten to go there as a child. And then the other part, I don't know any other, maybe like a botanist or a naturalist. I don't know what other field might, like we just sit for like at least an hour or an hour and a half without moving and staring at one thing, like studying it, sitting out in nature. Like if I didn't paint, I wouldn't just sit there and just like observe something. It's probably really boring. Well, when I have friends who are like, I want to come watch you paint, that'll be fun. And they come and like 10 minutes and they're like, I can't do this. I'm like, you are literally watching paint dry. Like, it's not that exciting. No, it is actually magical when you see somebody like make something in front of you. But yeah, it's just like observing, and it's such a unique thing to get to do as a human, to be able to sit in one place and observe. I can't really explain it if you've not done it, but I think that's a huge part of just learning about the environment that you're in and soaking it in and learning respect for it. And so there's nothing better to respect than something like the Bob Marshall.
I think when you choose a place to paint too, and you spend that time and you observe it, and for me anyway, it becomes a part of me. And when I see the painting or when I see that spot that I painted at, I just have this connection. Do you guys feel that too? Yeah, it becomes a part of you. So that's really wonderful too.
Thank you. So it sounds like you obviously had painted outside before you went into the wilderness. Can you speak to how this experience changed your art afterward, if at all?
I would say for me, like, it was at the beginning of my painting journey to like just try to be painting. And I was frustrated the whole time because I was not happy with what I was painting, but I was just growing a lot. Really, what it did for me was the whole experience as a whole of getting to. First of all, if you get accepted to it, that is already saying something. Like you are looked at as somewhat serious of an artist, and then to get to do a show at the Hockaday, like for a young artist, it was such a cool kind of launching into a career as a professional artist. So the whole experience, it was such like this package of like legitimacy almost that was offered by you guys and to somebody who is just wanting to paint and a really big launching point for a career, I guess.
Yeah, I feel that worked that way for me too. You know, it was such a huge experience, such an adventure. Let's put it that way. I felt like to go through that much trouble, you know, to get out there and to be out there for 11 days, just killing ourselves trying to paint as much as we possibly could. I sort of realized that I had just sort of gone to a different level, or maybe not that, but just a different place. I realized that for me, it wasn't a choice anymore to paint. Now it became a need. I even if I don't sell any more work in my entire life, I will continue to paint. It's just so fulfilling to me and gratifying. And I think that the Artist Wilderness Connection experience really brought that home for me. And I think that's when I turned into what I would call truly a serious artist.
Going with this one. Yeah, you know, I always think of the experience as being immersive, and you know, we all paint, we all go out and paint, and we'll go out and paint for half a day or maybe a day or whatever, or a couple hours. But when you're up for day after day after day, and it's immersive, it's almost monastic. It's which when you come back out, I think you have a better sense of concentration for your subject.
Yeah.
For me personally, I mean, there was really, other than, you know, having dinner with the biology crew, which is in one of these photographs up here, you know, you had people to talk to, but all day painting by yourself, you're your own conversation. And, you know, and I'm sure that if there was somebody going down the trail behind me, they thought, there's a lunatic down there, right over the edge there, with his back to a tree. Always had something to my back, by the way. There's another thing. When you're by yourself and you're next to a creek or something, you all of a sudden you realize that, you know, something could come up and literally chew my ears off, and you wouldn't know. So it's like,
Yeah, you're so
I always
focused.
put something behind me. That's kind of weird.
That's funny. That's a great segue into the next question about your encounters with any wildlife. If you had any interesting, fun, or scary stories to tell about that. There was a bear mentioned.
So you'll see on the slideshow where there was the live action where I'm painting. And so that evening, I was down painting by the stream, and Jenny had gone up to take a bath.
It's
And
up on the top of about a 20-foot rock.
Yeah.
So where the cabin is.
yeah.
And she was down on the
Bath.
river.
Never occurred to me.
We had a shower bag.
I was
Yeah,
one.
we had hot
Hanging
showers.
from a tree.
Yeah. Yeah. So one evening I'm down there painting, and I've pretty much finished, and I've packed everything up, and I'm just about ready to head up the rock, which you have to go around it and climb to the top of it. And I just look downstream, and I see a bear about maybe 500 feet downstream, just emerging from the willows on the opposite side of the stream. And I thought, oh, good, it's on the opposite side. So I'm calling to Jenny, and I'm saying, Jenny, there's a bear. And she's like, where? And I'm like, oh, I'll just run up. I'm ready. So
Well, I thought you didn't have your bear spray down
yeah,
there.
I know
Yeah,
you didn't.
so-
So she's up there running around looking for bear spray. I'm coming up the rock. She's ready to throw the bear spray to me down on where I no longer am. And she says, what bear? And I'm like, it was downstream. I was trying to get your attention so you would look downstream. So we're standing there, and I guess no bear. So just as we turn around, the bear comes back out of the willows on the opposite side of the stream. But this time it's swimming across the stream to our side. And I mean, it's not that far from our cabin to where the bear is coming across. And so we start, of course, yelling, hey bear, go away, bear. And its ears are perked up, and it's looking at us like, who are those crazy lunatics screaming at me? And why won't they shut up? And so it goes into the willows on our side of the river, and we were a little bit nervous for a while, but I think we scared it off because it went south or it went the other direction. We never saw it. But I
They
think,
did have
but like 2 days later, I mean, just on the trail, just outside of the cabin, I kid you not, was bear scat. Huge amount of bear scat. Took a picture of it. And I mean, so the bears were there. I mean, they were just passing us right by the cabin, but luckily we never had a face-to-face encounter. Yeah.
every day we kind of kept a list of the animals that we
Mhm.
saw, and one of the we had a little hummingbird that floated around all around us the whole time at the cabin. And one day it accidentally got inside the cabin, and it was so hot in there, and he couldn't get out. So we thought he might die. So we kept trying to get the hummingbird out of the cabin, and we finally got him on the bottom of a broom and just kind of carried him out. But we saw rabbits and fox, and
we saw moose tracks.
a moose came onto
The beach.
beach right where we would have our campfire at night. There was a muddy place because the river was going down quite rapidly. It was real hot that summer, and there was a large track and a small track, so we figured it was a mama and a calf moose. But yeah, that was kind of exciting too. Yeah.
Okay, I imagine it's the same bear, but in my head it was a grizzly, and it was massive.
Ours was a black.
No, I don't know. So the first day we get packed in and we get to the cabin, and we're just checking it out, and the packers are still there. And you go onto the side of Granite Cabin, and it's just like covered in claw marks and teeth marks and chunks of wood taken off of it. And me and Ken are like, Andy, like, is this from a bear? Like, this is bear marks, right? And he's like, yeah, there's bears around here. And we're like, I remember asking Andy, I was like, what are they doing? And he just said, quote, he said, they're just doing bear stuff. So, like, all right, whatever. There's definitely markings. So the first night we're in the cabin, it's so hot in there, and there's two bunks. I make Ken sleep on the top, and there's like gnats buzzing around. It's like, I don't know, it's dark, so it's got to be after 11. And Ken freaks out. He's like, I'm going outside. I'm sleeping in a tent. So he sets up his tent at like midnight. About 2 hours later, I get woken up. I'm in the you kind of forget where you're at, and you wake up in a foreign place. You're like, but I woke up to like whatever makes that thing on the side. I was hearing it. It was like crunching noises and the actual growling noises.
And Ken's outside in the
Ken's outside in the tent. And I remember it took me a couple seconds to realize what was going on, to wake up. And then I actually was petrified. I just laid there like this. And then about 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh no, Ken's outside. And I was like, I have to go to the door at least. And we left the door open, but on the door there's also a giant iron door that like matches the wooden door for bears and stuff. So and it comes apart in two. So there's a top and a bottom. And we left the door open because it's so hot, and then that metal grate shut. So I was like, I kind of felt unsafe too.
Yeah.
Like the bear could get in there, and it's pitch black, like you can't see in front of your face. And so I get a light, and I'm like, I start flickering it out the window, and I see Ken's like flicking back at me. So I'm like, oh, he's heard this noise too. He's probably freaking out. And I like slowly walk up to the door, and it's open already, right? And I just, in my head, I'm playing this movie, like I got this flashlight and I'm going to be beaming it around, and I'm going to look this way, there's going to be nothing, look this way, nothing, and I'm going to look back and there's going to be a grizzly bear like right here. And it sounds funny now, but like in the moment I was sure this was going to happen. I'm like, this is the end of Ken and I, both of us are gone. And I get there and I shine around, there's nothing, and I look at Ken, and he brought his gun, of course, and he's like waving it around outside the tent. And I'm like, Ken, put that away. Like, just get in here. And so I like covered him I got the bear spray. I was ready to pounce if I needed to. And in my head, it was a big grizzly bear. It was not a black bear.
Okay.
A little black bear. We never actually saw the bear, so it's up for debate. And Ken never slept outside again. Yeah, that was the first night, and we were just like, okay, this is gonna be a fun week. But we did see a black bear later that week. Same kind of thing on the side of the river. He was small, but couldn't have been the one that scraped this side of it.
Are you sure there was? I mean, did you see actual?
Oh, there was.
There
There was new marks. It was like, anyways.
So, yeah, up there when you're by yourself or just one other person, it's all a matter of what's going on up here. That is everything gets blown out of proportion. That note that you see once in a while come up, there's a handwritten, scrawled note that says, "Dead horse up the trail. Beware." Thanks for the warning. That was right on the edge of the meadow where my cabin was, and that's a split screen. So I'm standing. If that comes back by, I'm standing in the doorway of my cabin, and I had one of those metal things too, which I never shut at night. But I just shut the door because it really latched from the inside, but it also had one of those, lift the peg, big dowel, 1 inch, big dowel going all the way through. And the first night I was there after the amazing blackness and laying in the amazing quiet blackness, the dowel started to rattle. And, first of all, you're like, no, that's not happening. I'm really enjoying this. But then it goes from that to, and I'm not getting out of bed. I'm just, because I know it's latched, I'm not even going to go over there because I didn't have a Ken outside. I didn't care. But, so seriously, it's like I was in bed and I'm not, because there's something over there, and I'll open it and then I'll be in worse shape. And the next night it happened again, and I was like, I got a little braver, so I went over and just watched it, and it's moving. Stopped and moving again, and then it stopped. And I probably stood there way longer than I should have, but it quit moving. So I open it up, and a deer jumps off the porch. And it's like, they like salt. But I too thought I was going to die. It's going to go. But anyway, I never did see a bear. Never saw a bear, even though there was a dead horse off the trail.
There it is.
Yeah. 1.25 mile. And by the way, that was on the Pendant Pass Trail. And just a quick aside, my radio operator error, I'm sure. I couldn't get to work, but I felt I needed altitude. I hiked up that pass every day, but I took my pains. And that's why I brought that painting, because that painting came from going up there every day. But I had to walk by that horse every day, twice. Going
Wow.
up, twice coming down.
Smell nice.
Never, yeah. You know, they were going to get around to coming up and dealing with it. If there are Forest Service people in here, you know how they deal with them. And I think it involves high explosives.
Well, do you have any other questions, Cliff? Because it's
Yeah, we're at 8. Let's see if there's some from the
yeah.
audience.
Does anybody in the audience? What questions do you have for our panelists?
Are you chosen?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So the application process, typically it's at the beginning of each year, and then you submit an application with images and answer some questions. You submit a CV, and then there is a jury. It's juried, so then there's a committee that reviews those applications. And then, you know, one of the things, it's a great process because we're looking at somebody who's very well-rounded. So certainly want to see somebody that has some professional experience in their practice and can show that and put together a professional application. But also a large part of this, which Richie kind of touched on a little bit, is the community aspect, reaching out. One of the requirements of the residency program is that afterwards there's a community outreach component, and they need to describe that in detail in their application for this residency. So we look to that as well, because we feel that this is such an important program. We want to make sure that there's a connection and there's an opportunity to share that with our community. So whether that's through a workshop or a class or a presentation or an exhibition, that becomes part of it as well. So yeah, and this year we don't have the residency program because we're celebrating our 20th anniversary with a special exhibition at the Hockaday that will open in June. So I hope you can come to that. We'll have an opening reception, and then it'll be up June and into the fall, into October. So you can see some of the work that's part of the artists. So part of the program requirements too is at the end of the residency, they submit an artwork or writing or music to the program itself. And so we have a collection of all of those, and that's what the exhibit is going to be. And you can see some samples of that. These were hanging in the Hungry Horse Ranger Station, and they were brought over for this. But yeah, so this year, because we're not doing the residency in 2024, we're opening up the application a little early. We'll be opening it up in October of this year for next year for the residency. So if you or you know somebody who's interested in applying, please encourage them. We get applicants from all across the country. It's a fun process, even just to jury it, to see all of the different backgrounds and interests. And last year we had a record number of applicants. It was a very hard decision. It's hard, but yeah, that's not short answer.
Yes, sir. How do you
So for me, just today, seeing the paintings and honestly just being here talking about it, like all these memories are coming back. And especially these two, I was at the same cabin. So right away, Ginny's painting of the cliffs downstream from the cabin, I was like, I caught a really good fish out of that hole. And it just like, it just kind of brings back these incredible memories and keeps them alive. So I don't know, I love getting to see it. But the thing is, even though I've never been up to Hendon Cabin or anything, like you still feel, what it's like being back there, and it still gives you that feeling, because we were all there actually taking it all in, and it gets transmitted into the painting, whether it was done in the studio or not. So that's that. I always feel like what the artist was like. I can just feel it. So
Yeah. A shared a shared experience, and we've had so much fun revisiting it as we were asked to speak tonight. So, yeah, it's just a part of you now, forever, and a big part. So, yeah, it's fun and fun to hear these guys' stories too. Yeah. What?
Did everybody fish?
I
Yeah,
did a
I did.
lot.
Ginny taught me to fish out there, and I almost got her with the hook one time, so I quit.
I forgot that.
Yeah, but she was really quick. She ducked.
I didn't fish much, but I had that big group of people that you see in one of these
Uh-huh.
is the FWP, and Matt Boyer is standing in the background, and I think her name is Amber Steed, and a couple of volunteers. So I learned about fish. I learned how hard those people work, because they were following they were trying to find every barrier falls, every trickle up Salmon Creek, Salmon River. Yeah, they bushwhack everywhere. They work hard. Very cool. They were going to poison out Lena Lake to reintroduce cutthroat.
And if you do want to fish and feel like you're really good at it, go to Castle Lake.
Yeah.
You'll cast and you're like, just catch one every single time, and then you go fish anywhere else and you realize that's not what happens everywhere, but it's really fun.
Was there another question here, kind of in the? Yes, sir.
That was tricky, actually. Yeah, we had packed everything up so carefully, and Francesca's work is pastel. So if you shake it up a lot, you can lose some of the art off it before it gets fixed. And because we didn't have enough horses to get us out, the people had unpacked and repacked our work, and we were just scared to death. It was going to be all ruined, but it was fine. It was fine, and yeah, we had carriers and things like that. So, yeah, did you guys have any trouble? No.
Yes, sir.
I know. That's a very good question.
It is a good question.
I thought, well, like I said, we were like painting whatever was right there. It was like just a lot of forest, and after so long, I was like, I have to paint this outhouse. I actually have a funny story, which I won't actually share with. This is a very type 2 fun story about the outhouse. Let's just say it smelled really bad. Even like painting by it, you're like, oh. But it is kind of a staple of the backcountry, and so I thought it was kind of funny, but also it's a luxury when you're back there, and everybody who I think has been back at least to Granite Cabin or spent time backcountry camping or anything, you like really do appreciate something that is that disgusting. And I don't know, just kind of I always do love to draw attention to something that might be overlooked. Like a lot of times when I paint my landscapes, they're like a dirt road that has dead grass on it, and people are like, why would you ever choose to paint that? And for some reason I'm like, oh, I thought it was beautiful. or at least the way that you paint it can make it beautiful, or you can draw attention to something that oftentimes gets overlooked. And so this was pushing it a little far, being a little funny with it. But yeah, I just like drawing attention to, and it is important in backcountry, or a luxury, I would say. It has many stories, I'm sure, not just for me.
Any other comments about painting man-made structures when you're in a wilderness area? A lot of times, I mean, I go through the same halls at the ranger station, and you see the cozy cabin, is featured in, at least half of those paintings.
Yeah. Probably just it's a huge comfort too when you're back there, because there's nothing else, and it's maybe just unconsciously drawn to like, oh, I'm going to paint something where feels like there's people
Right.
in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, as much as we like the empty, the notion of the savage, empty wilderness, we also find great comfort in the human touch,
Mm.
and the
Yeah.
human mark, at least
Yeah.
when it's a cozy cabin, not something worse.
Yeah. Thanks.
And it's part of the wilderness too. Like I think we all a lot of times like separate ourselves, like the wild and what we've created, which there is something to that, but also we are a huge part of it's all like coexists, so that's important to say.
Yes, sir.
Ooh.
Pack rats.
Any problem?
No, just the mouse.
We had a friendly mouse.
We had a mouse that lived with us, and you just have to get over it. I remember about 2 days before we were going to leave, it found something to chew on, and that darn mouse would chew all night long, and it kept us awake. And we would tear apart the cabin, look at what is it chewing on, so we could get rid of it, but we never could figure it out. Yeah.
I never saw one of them. Somehow, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that if the choice was the bear on the outside or the mouse on the inside, it's an easy choice.
Oh yeah, no contest.
I can't let this one go because it's part of the backcountry culture. But the fellow that came through, that worked for the Forest Service with the horses on his way to Big Prairie, one of his tasks was to just basically take an inventory, if you will, of the cabin. And the cabin had a lot of stuff in it. I mean, from shovels and pickaxes and everything, to a couple of cupboards with food, and most of the food is sealed up stuff that you don't really want to pay too close to the expiration date. But I watched him. He opened the cupboard and he reached in, and I had actually looked in the cupboard, so I saw this and went. He took out a plastic bottle of Hellman's mayonnaise that
Had been opened?
Oh, sure. And it not only was open, but it kind of looked like a parfait.
Oh.
It'll settle out. I wish I could remember his name. He's a great guy. Good. He picked it up, gave it a good shake.
Oh no.
No, it's okay.
Oh.
And I said, really? And he goes, oh yeah, that's you don't have to refrigerate. Note to self.
Yeah, do our standard slip when we're in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Oh.
Great.
Well, thank you to all of our wonderful artists who joined us this evening, and thank you to Cliff, thank you to FACC and Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation and Flathead National Forest and Allison and Teresa and Cam and all of the other staff who's helped with this evening, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. This has been a great experience. I don't think I've laughed this hard in a long time. Also wanted to mention and remind everybody that the exhibition will be at the Hockaday in June 27th. Hope you can join us for the reception. And again, if you know somebody or you yourself are interested in applying for the program, applications will open in October. And for more information is at hockadaymuseum.com if you want to look up more information. So anything else to add, Cliff?
Well, I would like to correct the record. I mentioned 1.7 million acres earlier, and it's 1.6. So, and I'd also, to the extent that you consider yourself a wilderness advocate, let's all celebrate the 60th anniversary of the passage of the Wilderness Act this year, and keep your eye out for events locally and regionally and nationwide. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Good job.